Welcome, everyone, to another episode of HR and Payroll 2.0. I'm Pete Tiliakis, and as always, I'm joined by the legendary Julie Fernandez. Welcome, Julie.
Thanks, Pete. And I'm excited to have John introduce himself. He's today's guest today.
Yes, we have another fellow ATLian, at least one that lives in the ATL. Mr. John Sarvari, the Chief Technology Officer of AppyHere, is here to talk the state of talent with us. I'm happy to have you, John. Excited to see you, man.
By the way, ATL, that's Atlanta for people who don't follow Pete's three-letter words.
Come on, man. ATLians, that's us.
Yeah. Sorry, John. Go ahead.
No, you're fine. Actually, from my accent, I'm glad you clarified that because people may have wondered, what on earth are you talking about? So originally from Oxford, England, but yes, I live in Atlanta, Georgia. Looking forward to the conversation.
Yeah, the Big Peach. We're good to have you, man. So excited to have you. I know we've been looking forward to this for a minute, and we've been we want to talk the world of recruiting. I know you're on the front lines of that. I've been having a lot of conversations lately with leaders that it's an angst-riddled process right now. And Julie, I know you've probably got some insights too from your clients, at least on this side of the fence. So Julie, you want to do the honors?
Well, yes, I do, actually, John. So we start by asking folks how on earth they got into HR, payroll, recruiting, maybe leaning that way in your case. And after you get through telling us how you did, maybe you didn't start out thinking you were going to do that, but we'll ask you why you stay.
It's an interesting question. Now, I may not have taken your typical path, although I'm sure as most of us, I've had an experience working in an organization that, and sorry, I should be clear here, where I specialize is in frontline workers. So I've actually had that personal experience very early on before my career really started working in retail. But my journey came through from working in the software industry for a number of decades. But initially, my forte was actually supply chain software. So I've worked in the software industry. So for those of you that may not know, supply chain is really the act of deciding what to manufacture, when to manufacture, how to procure the raw materials, how to ship it, and then how to sell it. How much should you anticipate having in the store? So it's moving all the products that we enjoy and basically need for our lives in every day from a retail setting. But what was interesting, we had software that would help optimize that buying process, the manufacturing process, and how much to put into the store with an anticipation of how many people actually want this product. And also, what price would they actually like it at to maximize the revenue, the margins for the retailers? We also had workforce management, and there we started to see a lot of challenges. With manufacturing, we can anticipate when a piece of equipment will fail, and we can work around that. When it comes to retail, we know how to ship products. We can create contingency plans if we're not able to ship product at the right time. But people are always involved in the process, and I don't want to call them the weak link, but they're definitely an element of what should be an optimal plan, should generate the maximum margin and revenue for a company. It's where it would often fall apart. So with workforce management, it's, yes, I've got the right people involved on the day to make sure that whatever tasks are required should be performed, but someone doesn't show up. Someone does an immediate quit. They disappear, frontline workers.
Yep.
So at the time, in 2018, I was working with a gentleman by the name of Serge Machacotte, who formerly was a GM at Talio, going back a number of years. And we had a very close relationship. We were chatting and we're saying, what could we do that's new, that's outside of the space that we're currently in? And what Serge brought up was, in his tenure at Talio, there's a big challenge in frontline worker hiring because it's kind of this square peg, round hole challenge where the ATS, the applicant tracking systems that were around then, and in truth, many of them are still around today.
Exactly.
They're great at hiring professionals, long, drawn out process, ones that we're all familiar with that take weeks, if not months. But where they fail is being able to seize the moment of attention for frontline workers. So we felt this space, frontline worker recruitment, was ripe for some level of disruption. And that's how I got into really the HR side of the house in 2018. But I do think that everything I did leading up to that gave me some great insights and understanding and comprehension that whilst, yes, I'm a little bit of a greenhorn when I came into this truly, I had experiences that really made me think about how can we do things differently. And then I should mention it's not about me, but as we started to formulate our business, we brought in outside advisors that became full-time employees that worked directly in the space. So recruitment advisors.
Yeah.
So people from agencies. And so that's really my background. I'm sorry, it's a little long-winded, but I want to make sure you understand.
You went from a supply chain for parts to maybe supply chain for people.
Yeah. And it's funny you mentioned that.
It translates.
Yeah, it really does, because we actually see a lot of the techniques that we would employ to, I mentioned forecasting, how much demand there'd be for a product in a store. We actually see that somewhat similar in being able to apply that to people. We don't want to think of people as parts. Please don't misunderstand me. But what about a world where we can anticipate attrition before it happens?
Yep.
That gets really interesting. And that's really, when we think about what I enjoy doing and why am I in this space now, solving problems, addressing business needs. But the biggest excitement I have is actually back to the job seeker, helping them find work.
Yeah.
And we can talk about that in more detail a little bit later.
Yeah, I love it.
And I think the time is ripe now too, John, for you described the phenomenon, which absolutely has been the case forever, which is that focus on top level talent and, white collar, workforces where there's a lot more predictability. And since maybe last year, I think, right, P, we've started seeing, this kind of tectonic shift toward frontline workers. And that's where all the there's a lot of complexity there that people just didn't want to dig into, first.
Yeah, and the front line's kind of, when we've talked a lot about like the sort of this fissure between the C-suite and the front line, and that there's front line's kind of fed up too, right? Like, I think there's a lot of folks that are sick of doing certain types of work. They want opportunity, they want a great employee experience beyond just tech and perks, right? They want career advancement. They want those things. And so, and equity, hopefully, right. In what they're helping to build. So a lot of angst out there, but look, John, so did we get to why you stay? Is it for the challenge? I think you said, or?
Yeah, it's for the challenge and that ability to really help people.
Yeah. No, I love it. I think there's a lot of folks that I've said this before in my career. I've worked with several really great leaders who came from other worlds that you would never think, and they've stayed in the HR world, whether it's tech or whatever. And I think it's because they were able to apply these other lenses that are very translatable to a world that just needs all the help we can get in doing better. I mean, you talk about these great insights that so many organizations are starting to take advantage of, but like, everybody should have it, right? I mean, that's how it should be. We should be able to tell exactly that, right? Hey, we've got low stock over here of this popular item. We should say we got low stock of engineers over here. We need to get this sorted too, or it's coming, right? Mm-hmm. So.
Well, what's also interesting about that is, we come from a time when making those types of nonlinear moves in your career, it takes a lot, of time. And it's not very natural. And we're now functioning in a time where nonlinear career moves and recognizing talent for skills and not for linear, job progression is also coming of age. And the jump you made, will probably be made quicker by generations that follow us.
Yeah.
Julia, if I may just say,
they expect that. Oh,
for sure. And Julia, you made reference to something I think that's very important in terms of a shift. That, let's say there were publications about this back in 2023, but skills-based hiring. Don't just look at the direct experience of somebody. Understand what were the tasks and skill sets involved in performing their prior roles, and how well do those adapt and fit to the needs of the job they're being considered for. It's becoming a very important element. Yeah.
And behaviors and capabilities that they display that might lead them to some path they're not thinking about. That's another thing. I think a lot of folks could be placed in better roles if they just sort of were nudged in a way that said, "Hey, did you realize you exhibit this skill, or you exhibit this behavior, or whatever?"
Well, I hope folks do it even when they, when they hear something on our podcast and they look at it and they go to your LinkedIn profile, right, John, and look and go, why is this an HR and payroll department guest? Like, what happened here?
Yeah. So John, I'm dying to know, how the hell did you end up in Atlanta?
I love of a lady.
Oh, okay.
Isn't that a downfall of every
time.
Lad?
Happens every time. First it's HR, then it's a woman.
Right. Well, then that was over 20 years ago, so and we're still together, so that's all good, right?
No, that's fantastic. That's
The
fantastic. No, I'm
best
just kidding.
reason to
Yes.
end up somewhere, John.
Yes, yeah. HR moved me here. I'll say that. So that's why I'm here. But I wanted to be here as a kid. This was the big city to me. I grew up in Florida, so Atlanta was like the big city. You know, we went here for baseball games and you know, to whatever the attractions around here. So for me, this was it. This was it.
This is home for me now, for sure.
And as a consultant, I was flying through here twice a week. So, there's 2 hours each time we're getting, and, it was like, I might as well just be here. You know what I mean? Delta's already tattooed on my neck. So I'm convinced when you move to Atlanta that they do that. They like, here, you're a Sky Miles here now. Yeah. We own you now.
Or Detroit. I'm sure I have a tattoo.
I love Delta. Shout out Delta. I am coming up on my 1,000,000 miles and I have never had a bad experience. And I hope everyone has a great experience. So
same for me.
I'm all about Delta.
I agree with you, Pete.
Yeah. I also live here, and I don't really feel like I have you have a lot of choice, actually. I just choose Delta. So anyway,
all right, hey, let's move beyond the Delta love fest.
Yes. All right. Okay. So I want to talk about the state of talent. I want to talk about the state of hiring, especially on the front line, because I hear that a lot, right, Julie? I know we've talked to frontline worker and the experience and the fact that so much more HR is happening with the frontline manager and just many topics, but. One of the things that kind of was disturbing this week is I was getting a little hot about, me when I get on subjects. So the first subject was this fraud that we saw. We had shared a post together about this lady, and I'll just paraphrase it because the post was taken down. So we don't know if this is true or whatever, but you can Google this type of thing and it's everywhere, right? It definitely is. Recruiting fraud. Like I never really put my brain around that and spent a lot of time talking about it or thinking about it, but I have seen it here and there, right? And this poor woman, it sounds like she was out of work for well over a year. A very reputable brand, I think it was a big pharma, came, offered a job. It was all very remote. She said, look, I'm in HR. We've conducted some of these things remotely. I don't think she ever actually spoke to anyone, but there was just a lot of exchanges through emails and such and messages and background checks and all this stuff. And I think in the end, there was some nefariousness that tipped her off that they wanted her to begin depositing checks and things just got really weird. And she said the crazy thing is everything that they interacted with her with technology wise and otherwise was branded plenty of, matching to what she thought she was signing up for. So one, I'm like, okay, is that technology's fault that it's happening? Like people are misusing technology, or is it just... Is technology really the solution? And maybe this organization wasn't doing enough to protect their brand from this. I don't know. I mean, what's your take on recruiting fraud, John?
Yeah, it's interesting and concerning.
Yeah.
What I'm seeing,
it's preying on vulnerable people is what bothers me.
Yeah, exactly. And what's quite concerning is there's faster adoption of more advanced technologies. We've all heard of ChatGPT and these large language models. The bad actors are adopting the technology faster than the organizations that are genuinely trying to hire.
That's a great point.
Worrying. There's different types of fraud that are being committed, but generally it's all, let's say, unsolicited outreach to individuals. I personally received multiple text messages where someone is saying, hey, we've got hourly work that you may be interested in. How they derive, anything about me connected with hourly work other than obviously the company that we form, I don't know. But what they're trying to do is, and by the way, the Federal Trade Commission in the US has posted warnings about this. There's great insights there that definitely helps the job seeker protect themselves. But I think all of us in this space should be aware of what's happening to make sure we're doing our best to combat it, which I'll talk about in a moment with technology, but we need to be aware of what's happening. And I don't think it's enough just to have, let's say, a statement, because most companies have these about a warning of recruitment fraud. We need to more directly address this. But, the easy option is they just start to request personal information such as a social security number early in the process. So yes, it's identity theft. But there is this alternative path with they'll send you a check saying that you need to buy some equipment. Here's where you need to buy the equipment from. And it's what they're calling clear check fraud, because the check they send you will not clear, but they want you to go and buy the equipment, or in other cases, a flight to come out for the in-person interview. And they'll reimburse you. But of course, by the time you've gone and bought the flight, which is through their website, that's how they catch the money on the other end, the check bounces.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
And the list goes on. But again, what we're seeing is quite elegant levels of engagement with the person they're trying to commit fraud against.
Wow.
Using things like ChatGPT to make it sound like there's a person on the other end. They're answering questions and they're reasonable responses. So even the FTC hasn't fully caught up with where the current state of that fraudulent activity is, where it looks like a person, but it's not a person. So they're able to commit this fraud on massive scales.
Yeah. Crazy. Everything's a scam.
Yeah.
I can tell you too that there's an awful lot of targeting of new hires. So I'm sure it happens with recruits, but we've just brought in several folks to our organization, and one that is reporting to me within the first week of her employment had gotten several outreaches impersonating me and doing exactly the things, John, you're talking about doing. Like that is. It's stunning. It's your first boss, right? It's the new boss or whatever. And so it's crazy how quick and dramatic the bad actors are flying into this process.
Yes.
Right?
Unbelievable.
Yeah. And I think there's another element to this that I think for the employers, we need to be aware of. We create some of the problem ourselves. There's a recent study that was done by CNBC where they concluded 4 out of 10 companies actually admitted to posting fake jobs using job boards that we could name many of them. But it's quite concerning. And 7 out of 10 hiring managers in this survey that was conducted actually believe it's fair game. That's morally acceptable. That's the term that they were using because they're trying to gather insights or they're trying to sweep a lot of resumes. So in the future, they can target those people with genuine intention. But the problem is the job seeker. And this is what we've done a lot. So you can read all these published, but we've done a lot of research talking to people that are actively looking for work, people that have found work, people that have failed to find work. It's really interesting when you start talking to them and hear their experiences when it pertains to fraud. Because we started talking about malicious actors, but now they're kind of put them all into the bucket where company X, they never responded to me. I applied. I sent them additional information. Maybe they actually asked me that. But again, the communication fell off face of the earth. I don't know what's going on. So they actually consider that fraud as well. So we need to be careful what we're doing as hiring entities with genuine intent and how that is considered or perceived by the job seekers themselves.
Yeah, that's a great point. You can see a lot of anxiety out there between the recruiters and the applicants of saying, like, you've got the recruiters saying, I'm getting a million applications for this one job. I literally saw something the other day, said something like got 6 million. I don't know if that's possible. Maybe it's a course of a month or something. I don't know what it was. Some huge number. For a small number of jobs. And then you've also got the applicants, I think, are saying, oh, I'm just getting rejected by AI and I can't get past the firewall and no one will hire me because of it. So it's like this conundrum of like tug of war over who, and AI is in the middle just laughing. You know what I mean? Like I feel, like the mayhem guy on the Allstate commercial, but a little gremlin.
I have to believe, and I'd be interested to know if you've ever heard, John, somebody even talking about the idea of credentializing themselves in this space, right? So when I think about some of that, and you think about every company and their own brand going out and trying to make this happen and learning their own lessons along the way versus some of the folks that are specialized in recruiting, working out the kinks and also becoming reputable for, like I know if I shop at, here for my jobs, like there's some legitimate practices happening, whereas the others probably fine, but you just don't know.
Yeah. I do believe that is where the world is going. How quickly we'll get there, I don't know. And I think there's a simple way to think about it. It's smashing together the concept of the ATS, so the applicant tracking system that we all use to help bring candidates through the process, and the job boards. These today are two separate things. So typically an ATS will connect to a job board to send the job posting. Right. But bringing those two together, and then most importantly, when you talk about that concept of the job board, it's happening across multiple employing companies. Then being able to credentialize both the employers, but also the job seekers, because that's the other side of this that can happen. people can, let's say, game the system when it comes to most ATS systems, have multiple identities. So they start coming and adding to that challenge you mentioned earlier, Pete, with thousands and thousands of applications coming in, and how do you sift through, find the wheat from the chaff? I'll give you a direct statistic. We have a customer up in Canada, and they receive up to about 35,000 applications a week.
Wow.
Now, even in their peak period, they're hiring about 1,000 people. So again, what we found through our experiment was, I'd say experimenting, trying different things. How do we engage with those job seekers? Keeping them informed, letting them know where they are in the process. Because when you've got that ratio of applicants to hires, you need to keep these people informed, but also give them the encouragement, hey, stay with it. Or alternatively, hey, if you considered maybe a different location, it's only two miles away, you could get work there, or your work hours of availability, or maybe it's a skills change. So being able to do that, I think, is important. But back to the point you raised, Julie, I really think this concept of credentializing people will become very important in the future to help negate the problem of the malicious or bad actors.
Yeah. Wasn't blockchain supposed to kind of do that?
It is, but it's very heavyweight.
Yeah. The Velocity Network was doing a lot with that. When they launched, I remember Cornerstone and Niamo and some of those guys got in on Velocity, and that was supposed to be to me, that's been the best use case in the HR world for, other than money movement, which totally different thing. But
yeah.
I think there's simpler ways of it to achieve the same, though.
Yeah. And you're thinking specifically, like, John, you said that it happens in reverse, and the candidates also defraud the system. And I think the way, Pete, you got to blockchain was things like being able to credentialize your education and your licensure, right? And those sorts of things.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. We're talking two different things then. No, but really though, I think that there is all this, like, back to my kind of angst or the gremlin of AI. Like, it's almost like you see the recruiters getting stressed because they're getting overwhelmed, and you got the end users, applicants and candidates are like getting stressed because they feel like they're getting nowhere. And it's like, is AI a problem right now? Are we just not using it well? Is it too early? Like, what's going on, man?
Well, so I'll give you two pieces in response to that. I think, first of all, I talked about bad actors, right? So the people that really have true bad intent. But the problem is, I'm also seeing that the candidates themselves are adopting some of this technology faster, than the organizations are looking to hire people.
Right.
So whether it's, we've got solutions out there now that help you apply en masse for positions. So you're not really applying as an individual.
Right.
It's tailoring, whether it's completing the application process and then doing a cover letter through an email that looks very, very well written, but it's all AI. So that's adding to that volume problem. But the next one is when you're interviewing a candidate, there's now those tools. You can have this running on your phone whilst you've got a virtual interview taking place. You precede it with some information about the company, the position, who the interviewer is, and it gives you very elegant responses. So to your question, Pete, I think we in the HR space need to move much, much faster to adopt the technology. Combating what's going on, I guess, might be a way of saying it, but I think it's just to keep up with the other levels of adoption that we're seeing, whether it's the candidates or the malicious actors. We've just got to move faster.
Yeah. And maybe that's how you're getting 35,000, every week, right? Your candidates are figuring out how to.
Or the lady with the million or whatever. Well, I think I swear it said $1 million. I mean, maybe it's a month. I don't know. I have to go back and look at that one, but it was a lot. It was a lot.
I could well believe it, Pete. It is interesting because there is again, in certain markets, and markets being, a geographical area, there's a glut of people looking for work. I mean, there's many things that have been written about post-pandemic, recruitment and job hunting. And, it really shifted both in terms of, the number of people that were looking for work post-pandemic, but also their expectations. It changed quite dramatically. And I think we see that all as consumers in the tip economy we're dealing with here in the US.
Yeah, absolutely. So go ahead, Julie. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, another interesting flavor of that I saw today when I opened my LinkedIn feed. So I don't know, if others had seen it or not, but it was a feed that was skeptical about AI's use in skills matching, right? And it showed maybe 30 different engineering titles, levels, roles. I mean, they were different positions, and every single one of them had been tagged with the same two skills, innovation and something else, right? So we have these problem solving, who knows? We have these like generic skills that we're talking about being so important. And in the end, how differentiating are they if they show up in every level across the organization and similar or not similar jobs? There's no differentiation. And I think that was a legitimate critique, right?
Interesting. Everybody gets a skill.
Yeah. Well, I guess from our perspective, as we look at it, as we mentioned a few times, we focus in on the frontline worker.
Right.
I would say that techniques have applicability in certain areas and not others. They can be misused or misrepresent reality in others. So I would say where we do skills matching, we wouldn't think it's appropriate for what we might refer to as a white collar, high professional position, because Julie, the domain you mentioned, engineering, that's where I came from. And I can see how, let's say, a generic model using ONET from Bureau of Labor Statistics would tag everybody with the same set of skills and tasks that would be performed in that regard. But for frontline, it's very, very powerful because there's a lot of transferability. Simple example, if you've been working in retail, maybe a store associate, there's actually a transferable skill to become a server in food service industry. It makes sense to us, but there's that element of customer service. How personable are you as an individual? Do you listen to the instructions?
Soft skills.
Transfers across quite nicely.
Yeah. So, John, you guys are out there sort of on that front line, right? The backbone of the workforce, the frontline worker. What's going on? Like, what's the state of talent right now? What are we heading into in 2025? Because it feels like there's still a lot of angst, I guess. Like you talk to people, a lot of people are looking for work. A lot of people don't like the work that's out there, right? A lot of organizations just, we've seen a bunch of businesses closing because they can't find talent, or just, it's not viable where they are anymore. What's going on? Like,
I think the key here is competition for the same talent, right? So the talent pool hasn't necessarily grown. The number of organizations looking for the talent has. Now, their needs may have shifted because we all know that many businesses, retail particularly, have closed down as a result of the pandemic. But
COVID zapped a lot of those retail organizations. Very
So what we're now seeing is there's a high increase in the importance or significance of being responsive and seizing the moment of attention you get from the frontline worker. So again, this is where, and I would recommend this to everybody, talk to your existing employees. As you go through a recruitment process, reach out to some of those candidates that may have made it some way through that candidate journey and some that you haven't even considered early on, because they're incredible insights. So what you come to learn, because the typical frontline worker's lifestyle is different from ours. I'm not saying better or worse, just different, but they may live very much paycheck to paycheck. They may have more than one job. So when they lose a job, it's very important for them to find a new job quickly. They typically don't want to take a long commute because the hourly rate doesn't support the expense of transportation. So in that competitive market, looking for, talent, and we all want the right talent. We just want to bring in warm bodies, but it means you need to seize that moment of attention. And forgive me for using that phrase multiple times, but it's really important for us to be successful in finding those people and hiring those people. But for the job seeker, and that's why it's important for us. There's all sorts of things that we can do that involve bringing technology in. And we hear it as we're out talking to people in the market, looking at solutions. The drive from the board members down, the executive team, adopt AI, find ways to adopt AI. We've seen success and failure in that regard with the early movers. The big challenge has been where people have tried to do something very piecemeal, layering in on top of an existing solution and trying to automate the process. That can be challenging. So for HR leaders, the big concern with trying to piecemeal the solution together is your skill set and your attention be redirected to making that part of success versus what you really need to focus on is ensuring the hiring is happening at the pace to support the business in its growth and its stability. So I hope that helps a little. Speed, I think, is incredibly important. Flexibility is another element. And by flexibility, that's actually the characteristics of what the job looks like. What are the hours of work? Benefits. Some of these are, let's say, they've been around a long time, but people's expectations around benefits and, let's say, even the importance of brand have shifted. But
Agreed.
Definitely tied around all of this is communication. Because one thing that came out loud and clear, whether we're talking about some of our surveys that we conducted with people face to face, it's not just a survey we send out, back in 2018 or as recently as last year, is being ghosted by the recruiters. In their mind.
What an awful experience for the brand, you know?
Yeah. And the sad thing is it starts affecting some of these brands. You know, if you're a retailer, it creates reluctance to shop there if they feel they've had a bad candidate experience. I think most people in that type of role that type of business, retail, consumer facing, understand this, but it's become even more important and it will continue to, I think, increase going forward. So make sure you communicate. Bad news is good news in some regard, because at least the person then knows as a job seeker, I've not been as successful, I can move on. The not knowing is one of the most frustrating things for the job seeker.
Hi, we're Meg and Amy from The Meg and Amy Show.
We're not only tech execs and big picture thinkers, we're also best friends.
We're curious learners. And on this podcast, we're challenging the status quo and activating the future.
And we're going to give advice about work and leadership, right, Meg?
You know, we can't help ourselves. But this podcast is about exploring possibility, not being right.
That sounds refreshing.
For more, tune in to The Meg and Amy Show.
Do you think that marathon, like I was in the media world, worked for the Walt Disney Company. I got a very nice dose of what it takes, with frontline workers from the, managing the Walt Disney World Resort, side of things. And, those recruiters, it's a marathon. Like they never get to stop. It never ends. And I can't imagine like, Disney had a great retention rate but I can't imagine in those like, franchises that do have a very high turnover, it's or whatever, right? Any type of business that has that, it's a lot. And you kind of wonder, like, is tech going to do it, or because they're still the tech's here and they're still having all this anxiety and trouble, and it's still hard.
So I think it's a combination of two tech words, but I'm going to use the full expanded word. Yes, technology, but also technique. So. I know this sounds a little strange.
Well, the flexibility is a huge underlying foundational part of it. I think the more modular you can make the experience for people to say, these are the pieces and parts that make up what I want to have as my experience, I think that's going to help. So that's a big part of it. Let me preface that. Yeah.
But you see, technique for me is as simple as making sure as a candidate comes in, they apply. Don't just gather the basic information. Inform them about the expectations of the roles. Look, in today's world of, the doom scrolling, nobody reads everything you write. They'll scan through with their eyes and pick out salient points they think are relevant. Now, again, yes, if you are, let's say, looking for career growth in a long-term role, as you get more senior positions, yes, people spend more time reading job descriptions. So I don't want to overgeneralize, but we've definitely seen, because we measure what people are doing in the solution, people will spend more time watching a video. Videos are very interesting because it gives you a parallel ability to educate somebody on the expectations of the role. You have the visuals and then you have the talk track. So that's very powerful. As you ask them screening questions in your ATS, don't just ask a simple, can you lift a certain weight? Give the question what it deserves, a real description of why you're about to ask the question, and then ask the question. Preface it. What we found is, and this is the interesting other side beyond the recruitment, by better informing the candidates of the expectations you have for them in that role, it increases retention.
Makes sense.
I would hope it would self-select out some folks as well, right? I mean, you want candidates, but in this world where we start to see a proliferation of candidates because you're tech enabling it to be easier to get and to sort through them, then like, for goodness sakes, let people go, oh yeah, no, I didn't think about that. Like I want nothing to do with that.
But Julie, this is where, again, that actual combining now of technology and technique. So the technology, you can ask the questions in a structured way. And then you can use the technique to do the analysis. Where are people dropping out? What are my cliff points in my process? And you start to learn. We see some really interesting things that can be very regional in the behavior of the candidates and the expectations they have. So being able to analyze that and actually bring that data back in, which again, great when you have high volume frontline workers, much more difficult to do with white collar positions where you have fewer candidates coming in. But it's really insightful. And, as HR leaders, you need to take advantage of that data and consider, what should I do about my hiring process? Maybe to increase my candidate pool as much as thin my candidate pool to the best candidates that I believe are relevant for the role.
Yeah.
As obvious as it is that we're talking about AI, which is one of the things we know we'll be talking about this year, to me, this is also very much end-to-end process type of an activity. Because if the recruiting bit is great, and we see a lot of companies, especially down market, where locally they're struggling for talent with competitors down the street, if they're not dropping out until you start to express some wage band information, then for goodness sakes, figure that out up front and putting that transparency forward, so you're not creating a lot of churn and work effort only to get that far and have a problem.
Couldn't agree more, Julie. And we've personally seen candidates move through the entire process from apply to getting the hire confirmed and go through the offer letter process, but even onboarding, all through in under an hour, which is really impressive, somewhat unheard of. But that's what the candidates are now expecting, is this fast decision, and then literally, let me show up tomorrow. So one thing you mentioned there, Julie, about kind of the end-to-end process, that's that part back to what I mentioned. Be careful about piecemealing something together, because you may make let's say the candidate experience worse, though you think you're actually streamlining. So again, connect with those job seekers as they come through and they drop out of different stages in the process, and really understand what was good, what was bad. It's incredibly insightful.
Yeah. And then administratively, your no-shows, right? In the frontline environment, because you got them through and ready and they're ready to go, next shift. And it's 4 times more effort to deal with a no-show.
And again, this is actually back to data. So you can see a direct correlation. So ignoring, let's say, the recruitment process up to the pre-onboarding, how long you wait between scheduling their first shift and that first shift actually happening. The longer that takes, the higher the likelihood of them ghosting you on first day. And as you say, whether it's retail, manufacturing, transportation, all of those real frontline positions, it's incredibly difficult for the organizations to handle that situation because you're back to square one.
Yeah.
Hey, so we've now gotten recruiters ghosting, and we have our, new hires ghosting.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody's ghosting each other. Nobody's doing any work.
But that's why you want to be able to capture that data and be able to act upon it. So we really believe in that. And again, maybe going back to my heritage, that's what the foundation of supply chain planning was built upon, gathering data and then predicting things for the future. So we do believe that regathering those insights, and it doesn't all have to be what we call structured data, right? Which is gathering data you can directly measure in a spreadsheet, conducting those surveys. I cannot emphasize enough for each and every HR leader the value of doing that and doing it on a regular basis. Don't believe that what you heard 18 months ago still applies today. This, to be frontline, is shifting very, very quickly. Talked about AI, how more advanced technology is being used both by malicious actors, by the candidates themselves. And we're kind of getting with the program now, but you need to make sure you understand what's changing, and it will continue to evolve over time. I mean, I'll make one last reference in the technology section. We've even reached the point with some frontline positions, why even conduct an interview? Because the candidate can come across very, very well through that medium by using some of these tools. There are better ways to make a decision. Bring that person in quickly. If it doesn't pan out, you can agree to separate. And that might be better for both the candidate and for your organization. So giving them a chance based on, let's say, the expectation, the skills-based assessment that there's a probability that they will be a good fit in this role, give them a chance. So,
yeah.
you know,
And culturally,
Interesting.
though, you really have to have an HR organization that takes a good hard look at whether they will offboard somebody that is not a good fit, right? I mean, there's a whole cultural and administrative, thinking that has to underlie trying some of those new things that,
Yeah.
and
that'd be
that's why
great. But if you're afraid to fire or to release somebody or to call it quits,
right.
don't go that route.
And Julie,
Yeah,
that's why we need to adopt the technology in our space, because what Pete was describing earlier, these million candidates coming in for a position. How on earth am I supposed to decide who's relevant to talk to? And I know back in around 2019, I forget the source, but there was a survey that had been conducted that talked about the average amount of time spent looking at a resume was 9 seconds. I mean, what can you conclude from a resume within 9 seconds? So, of course, the market tried to adapt, and then it became resume parsing. So what do people then do? They figure out there's keywords that get used to help you surface to the top. So, it's going to be a constant battle. I think it's just important that we both adopt the technology and then also listen to the people that are using it from the other side of this equation, not the recruiters alone, but the candidates, trying to understand what their experience is, and not just the people that were successful. Talk to the people that were not successful.
Yeah.
What worked.
And more. Yeah. And I think you said this maybe in the beginning, but if you're getting that, 35,000 a month or whatever, these large volumes, are you able to look at someone and say, hey, maybe you're not right for this role, but we've got this other thing that you really ought to consider because, wow, your skills, did you know?
Yeah.
I don't know if all companies are able to do that if they don't have the technology, right? They're kind of in a lane and they're hiring for one thing.
For sure. And Pete, so as I project beyond, let's say 2025, because there's a lot of work to be done to get there. And I think also the willingness for people to move in this direction. We often talk about upskilling for an existing employee, but what about upskilling job seekers to help them become more relevant for the jobs that are appealing?
We ought to teach this in high school.
I was going to ask, John, do you see, I could imagine there being, we have multiple generations in the workforce and they all participate in the front line. And I feel like, what's the trends in the movement favor, obviously, the incoming generations of workers that are proficient in this. So do you see folks that actually talk and have a strategy around how do I get, the more senior experienced, older generations that just are not going to care enough to fiddle around and try to bluff out. They can barely figure out how to do it sometimes, right?
Yeah, so. It is a challenge, let's say, because the younger generations are more apt to using, let's say, the preferred technology, the mobile devices to apply for the jobs in this space. So you have to make sure you make accommodations for ensuring that you get diversity in your applicant pool. But the great news is it's very easy to understand your diversity across each stage of the candidate journey. But that can range from, in the past, let's say within retail, you'd have the ability for people to fill in a piece of paper in the store. So providing something in the store to make it easy for them to apply there and then, as much as, yes, apply from home, could be scanning QR code in the store. But you've got to make sure, I think I'm going to steal someone else's reference, Eric Schmidt, former CEO of Google. I attended a conference once where he said, really, you've got to meet people where they are today versus where you want them to be tomorrow. So making sure we do have an ability for, regardless of age, regardless of technology competency, being able to bring them in through this process and give everybody a fair shot. But again, it goes back to, it's easy to measure these things today and do measure it because diversity in the workforce starts with the recruitment side of the house. You're not attracting the diversity there. It doesn't matter what you do the other side of this, it's not going to happen. So.
Yeah, the culture's got to be there too, for sure, and be facilitating that, hopefully enabling them for that. So So John, we could go on and on, man. I love this. This is some good stuff, and I want to share. You'll give us the links, hopefully, for how to get to that research. I think it'd be great to share that with our audience. But maybe give us some prognostication here, man. What are we talking about in 10 years from now? I was watching. I don't know if you guys. I'll kind of timestamp this by saying I watched the rocket come down last night. In the chopsticks. Amazing. What a time to be alive in technology. But man, I was thinking my wife and I were talking about, 10 years from now, what are we going to be watching come out of the sky. I don't know what's going to go on. Is that right? We'll be riding that thing, maybe, who knows, to the moon.
Yeah.
But what are we talking about in 10 years with recruiting and AI and just the way, will things get better, I guess, is what I'm asking. And what is it going to be like? I mean, I can't imagine what, my kids' generation, they're all 20 something starting their career. What are they going to be facing in their 30s,
Yeah. So I'll be careful here, right? It's my own opinion, but
yeah,
I truly believe there's going to be the advent, and I started talking about this to some degree earlier, the advent of the deep labor platform. So a real meeting place for workers or potential workers and the businesses to find a connection with each other to enable, a straight job seeker to upskill, not just within an organization, but outside of an organization. That could be something as simple as, because let's say forklift drivers, as much as we're going to have autonomy with that type of equipment, there still will need to be operators. So my expectation, you would using forklift certification. Why not offer people the ability to gain some level of certification on the expectation of earning additional dollars per hour? Make that easy for them.
Yeah.
So they can upskill outside of their current employer, and it could be in a different industry, but all with the objective of earning more money per hour. Maybe it's more convenient to them based on the location, the hours that they're looking for people to work. All of this, I think, will eventually come into more of a big glob of capability that will enable us as recruitment people in HR to find that talent quickly and also bring them into the organization with the least amount of friction. That's my belief, my prediction. How quickly we get there, I hope it's sooner rather than later. I mentioned to Julie, I don't think it's 2025, but I think in 2026, we should start to see some degree of this. But there's also got to be a willingness on our part as hiring entities to recognize we don't own the candidate. And it's quite frightening in the frontline space how what's really been created is the situation where each side sees each other as a commodity. That needs to change.
Yeah.
And, we really need to find a way to just connect people with greater ease, allow them to upskill more easily. So my hope is by 2026, we're starting to see these platforms develop where there's an understanding by those hiring entities. I don't own the candidate. It's just someone looking for work. So if they're not successful with me today, if I have enough information about them, maybe I can reach them tomorrow as their skill sets evolve based on employment they had elsewhere. So maybe employers working more collaboratively together, even within the same industry, recognizing there's this transiency in the workforce.
I was going to ask you that. Do you think, or is there a good example of like at what point do some of these industries start to say like, hey, look, we're the biggest, 3 or 4 vendors in the space, but we don't have enough talent to keep this industry going. We can see what's coming. How do we work together to start curating talent and make sure we all have enough, right? Because the reality of it is rising tides raise all boats. So let's work together. But does that exist? Is that, any good examples and anybody doing anything there?
Yeah. So I wouldn't say doing, but we hear some of our customers, both in retail and manufacturing, talk about a future where that will be a possibility. So sharing.
Imagine the GDP impacts of that. If all of our industries did that in America, my gosh, we could really be powerful.
So I'm thinking like you, I have my thoughtful face on now because I want to write like
Your
6
thoughtful
blogs.
face.
So I don't even know what to highlight out of this episode because there's so much. But it made me think of 2 things. When you started talking about collaboratives of talent, it made me think. Well, you would think that that unions, where there are unions, would be in a really good place to do this. Would they do it?
No,
maybe not.
No,
they might not even be the best people to do it. Let's be honest, right?
Yeah.
But those sorts of skills are there. And then when you first started with deep labor, a deep labor platform, I thought it's so interesting that you're not really equating this to gig work, right? Because that's been, maybe terminology of yore. But once you start getting into a skill that is needed at certain points in time, then you might be talking gig work and you might be impacting whether they're ever employees at all versus whether companies just get better at hiring contingent labor or some alternative type of, old day language gig work, right?
Yeah. You're very astute, Julie. I intentionally stayed away from using that as an analogy to where I think things are going. But I think to some degree, yes, that is the case. But you highlighted two elements that make it very challenging. One, unionization. But we have to understand why unions formed. I'm going to stay away from that topic.
Yeah, me too.
This could actually help here. The second one is, who do they really work for when you are I use your term here, gig worker moving between multiple retailers, manufacturer? That problem needs to be solved. Yeah. I think when we start looking at RPOs, there may be some semblance of that there that may eventually make its way down into this space.
And when you talk about measuring, John, I would first like to know, because having 20 somethings myself, I know more and more common, people think it's perfectly natural to be holding multiple jobs. I mean, for years we've done it because parents are trying to make ends meet, right? But younger generations are doing it intentionally and quite differently, right? And so employers need to figure out what their position and their culture is about workers that are not solely devoted to a full-time work experience with them, or who claim they can do full-time with more than one entity, right? Yeah. And measure and figure out some of that stuff so they even know what they think in this area.
Yeah, for sure.
I had an Uber driver recently. She's graduating from Georgia State, I believe it is, here in downtown. And I remember her telling me that she has 3 different things that she does for income. And I said, well, now will you be leaving those things to go do something, whatever? I can't remember her degree it was in. But anyway, the point was, she said, she was like, no, I don't think I am. She goes, I like having the security of multiple incomes. She's like, I got a lot of side passions I want to try. And I think she was a writer, actually. She wanted to write maybe some screenplays or something. But the point was, like, for her, it was like, she liked the flexibility of being able to set her own schedules. She liked the income, right? The security of those extra incomes. And the fact that she didn't really know exactly what all she wanted to do, and she wanted to keep her options open. And I think that's the mentality. You're right, Julie, of a lot of the younger folks. I think they're looking at this like, hey, I got a lot of options. It's not just get a job, go to school, get a job, get a family. That's it. People are doing their own thing now at a younger age. And, whether it's TikTok or Etsy or driving Uber, it all pays the bills. You could build a nice little business around those things. So
I'll never forget. There was
skills.
Oh, for sure. There was one individual very early on, 2018, in one of our user workshops that we ran. I'll never forget the conversation I had with him. He was actually a chauffeur. It was an Uber-like company, which may sound strange, but it was all electric vehicles. But he said, I have 2 jobs because my passion is cooking. Yeah. So I'm a cook outside of the hours that I am actually driving. But the problem is, cooking won't bring enough money in to feed family. Yeah. So a very basic example, because these were typically offset by weekend versus day of the week. But it was kind of enlightening, because I guess historically, certainly our generation, we wouldn't think of doing that except when we were very young. This was an individual that was older than me. Yeah. So there was the passion as much as the money. So he's kind of saw this from 2 different sides. Yeah. It was kind of interesting. And so people want solutions. They want the ability to get considered for a job based on their availability, their willingness to perform certain pieces of work.
And it's quite unpopular to say, but I really believe that employers have every right to really scrutinize whether an employee can have 2 masters, 3 masters, 4 masters. Mm-hmm. And, the tagline of folks that are proponents of that often is, well, if I can get the job done, then what does it matter? But you don't get you don't get devotion and excellence and extra, and the extra that you sometimes want and need out of your star performers in the work world if they're serving 4 masters, right? I mean, it's not possible. So that's like I just poo-pooed the whole thing that everybody's really excited about. But
you didn't, right? So, but I think it's a generational shift, because I certainly think, there's no way I could hold multiple jobs down and be successful across, let's say, 2 or more. But when we look at the younger generation, they think that's very normal because of other things they do in their lives outside of work. They think they can do multiple things. And I'm not saying they can't, but they don't have to excel at everything. They just have to be good at all the things they want to do. And so that carries across into their work lives good or bad.
And quite honestly, they've seen our generation put in 60 hours for a 40-hour paid work week, and they find that very distasteful.
Yes.
And they're like, "Why on earth are you doing that? That looks like you're a stupid." It looks like some kind of generational stupidity to me. Like that's not what I'm being paid for. So lots to unwrap there.
Yeah,
Sure.
yeah. Well, this has been awesome, John. I really appreciate you. Where can folks get in touch with you? Where can we connect?
Okay, sure. So you can find me on LinkedIn, of course, but the company that we formed is AppyHere. So we like to say we take the H out of applying. So AppyHere. I'd say our forte is in frontline workers, retail, manufacturing, transportation, logistics. The list goes on. But really, we think about hourly workers. We would love to have a conversation, even if you don't have needs today, but to share some of our insights, what we're seeing with our customer base, which is quite fascinating. And then, as I say, the other side of that, the job seekers, what the pulse is, what's going on. And we do find, by the way, it's highly regionalized. So what we see in Atlanta, Pete, will be very different from what Julie's seeing now down in Florida.
Yeah.
So, interesting.
Interesting. Well, thank you so much, man. I really appreciate it. I'll take if you could send me those links for the research, we'll pop them in our description. We'll make sure you get the links to get to you. And we appreciate you sharing the insights, man. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for your time.
We'll see you guys next time.
Thanks, John.
Take care. Bye-bye.